Okay, let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today into something pretty huge, a real societal challenge, actually.
Mm-hmm.
How does a fundamental, abstract, really spiritual idea, specifically this core concept of a power greater than ourselves, how does that actually stick? How does it survive and stay relevant for millions of different people?
Yeah, people from all walks of life, different languages, different beliefs. It's a massive translational puzzle, isn't it?
Totally.
Because you're taking this idea that, well, it has to meet someone at their absolute lowest point, psychologically, demanding total surrender.
Right bottom.
But at the same time, it has to lift them up spiritually, give them, real hope, unbounded hope. And it needs to do both while somehow being accessible to everyone.
So our mission today, then, is looking at how this was designed, the foundation of the program.
Exactly. We're exploring how these essential spiritual ideas are put together so they're not just preserved, but they're incredibly malleable.
Flexible.
Flexible. Okay. Yeah. Emphasizing that flexibility, humility, and the shared experience. That's the real language of recovery here.
And that flexibility, that brilliance, it starts right there in the basic text, doesn't it? That phrase, God as we understood him.
Oh, absolutely.
That seems like, I don't know, maybe one of the most genius bits of adaptable language ever put together for a group trying to unify people across these huge divides. Why is that adaptability so crucial strategically?
Well, think about it. Without that phrase, the whole thing just becomes rigid dogma.
Right.
That phrase is like a firewall. It stops it from being just one specific religion's thing. It's absolutely key to bringing together people with wildly different backgrounds, ethnic, religious, even just their personal take on the world.
So if it demanded, say, one strict definition of God,
It would immediately shut out huge numbers of people whose biggest hurdle might be, past trauma with organized religion, or maybe they're just deeply agnostic or atheist.
so the program, it's built to allow for even demand pluralism. It avoids looking too religious, too absolute.
Exactly, it's by design. The founders, they sort of realized that demanding an absolute fixed idea of God was in itself a kind of alcoholic thinking.
Yeah.
That all or nothing, black and white rigidity,
Yeah.
that defines the addicted mindset. So when early folks pushed back saying this feels too religious, the response was practical.
Pointing back to the results.
Yeah, basically saying, look, we don't have a monopoly on God here. The focus shifts away from arguing theology and onto, well, does this work? And the literature itself, it backs this up. The core text, those first 164 pages of the big book, untouched since 1939, preserves the original message.
Okay.
But the personal stories section, that's been constantly updated, expanded.
And those stories are the living proof, aren't they? They show the formula working across all kinds of people, different ages, jobs, lifestyles, backgrounds.
Exactly. It shows the core message translating successfully again and again. It proves the basic equation works, even if the person hearing it looks or thinks completely differently from the original founders.
It shows its universality through just the sheer range of human experience in those stories.
Precisely. It's like a practical spiritual tool designed to get around the ego's objections by showing, hey, if it worked for them, maybe, just maybe, it could work for me.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning, the bedrock.
Yeah.
Step one. This is where that internal translation, denial into truth, has to happen. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Simple sentence, right?
Sounds simple.
But inside, for the person saying it, that must be a completely devastating admission. Total defeat.
It has to be. It's the necessary deflation point. You've got to hit that baseline of total liability where you finally admit my life is out of my control without really accepting that powerlessness deep down. Nothing else in the program clicked.
And psychologically, why is that so hard?
Well, addiction is literally rooted in the brain's reward system. Those substances people abuse, they temporarily but intensely boost the brain's dopamine.
So the brain doesn't register it as bad. It registers it as essential.
Pretty much. Essential for survival, or at least for happiness. That dopamine surge gives a temporary feeling of, life, joy, connection, things the person might feel they've lost.
Oh.
So the addiction becomes this flawed, temporary stand-in for real connection, love, vitality. And when someone struggling thinks about quitting, it feels terrifyingly hopeless.
Because they genuinely believe this substance is the only thing making life better.
Yes, or even just bearable. It's a core defense mechanism. The addiction convinces them, often unconsciously, that it's meeting some basic non-negotiable need.
Wow, okay, wait. If the brain is wired that way, to see the substance is necessary, how does anyone ever break through that denial? Where does that translation, that shift, actually happen?
It often happens in a moment, a flash of really deep self-reflection, sometimes a catastrophic moment. The breakthrough is when that fundamental equation of addiction gets flipped.
Flipped?
Yeah, Caroline Knapp described it perfectly. For years, her thinking was, I drink because I'm unhappy. That justified it. But then one morning, looking at the mess, she thought, maybe, just maybe, I'm unhappy because I drink.
Changing the cause and effect. That slight tweak.
Yeah.
That's the first crack in the denial.
It's desperation, sure, but it's the necessary kind.
She called it a seed of faith.
Exactly. Recognizing that your own willpower has totally failed. That's critical. Bill Wilson saw that. No amount of willpower alone, however strong you are, can beat the alcoholic compulsion.
We try to just, force our way
We
through.
try to bombard our problems with willpower, yeah. Trying to make the universe do what we want instead of realizing we need to align our will with something much bigger than ourselves.
Which leads us right into step 2, the first real spiritual anchor point. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. This feels like the first big translation exercise, turning that dark desperation to hope with a direction.
Step 2 is where the program's universality really comes through. You don't have to already believe in God. You just have to become willing to believe that some power greater than your own failed self-will exists.
So it doesn't matter if you're agnostic, atheist, maybe someone who uses a belief.
Doesn't matter. You can all stand together on this step. All you need is, well, a little humility admitting your way didn't work, and an open mind.
That's it.
That's the starting point. The concept just provides an opening, a realization that there's this basic idea of a restorative power deep down in everyone, even if it's been buried by disaster, trauma, or, worshiping other things like alcohol itself.
And that phrase, restore us to sanity, that's key too. It's not about fixing the outside world, it's about internal peace.
Exactly. And that's where the translation happens on a really personal, self-defined level. Think about Julia's story.
Okay.
For her, sanity wasn't about getting external approval. It meant self-love, self-care. Her family had always told her she was crazy for feeling things deeply or reacting strongly. But in recovery, she realized that sensitivity, that profound outlook, it was actually a strength. Her sanity was restored when she understood she wasn't crazy and never had been. That's translating a perceived defect into a feature.
It sounds like this higher power idea is introduced gently, not as some big judge.
No, not demanding compliance.
But more like a source of practical, personalized support.
Historically, yeah, that was crucial early on. Dr. Bob, one of the co-founders, he knew his audience. He presented God to the early members as a God of love, someone interested in their individual lives.
Supportive, not punitive.
Exactly. Supportive, not fire and brimstone. The process starts with knowing you're powerless, then moves right away to believing you can be rescued by a power defined by love and support, not judgment.
Okay, so now we're at a real turning point. Step 3. We've admitted powerlessness, found a glimmer of hope, now action. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Sounds simple, but it demands a whole new way of thinking, doesn't it?
The decision is the action, in a way. It's the key. Practicing this step is like opening a locked door, and the only key you need. It's called willingness.
Just willingness.
Just willingness. Once you unlock that door with willingness, the path to a faith that actually works seems to open up almost by itself. It's deciding to stop fighting, to control everything that opens you up to getting guidance.
But for someone whose whole life has been about that desperate struggle for control, even if it was just controlling when they got the next drink, how radical is that decision to just surrender your will?
It's completely radical because the alcoholic's whole problem has been the misuse of willpower. A very strong will, often, but misused.
Trying to force solutions.
Yeah, bombarding problems with it instead of trying to align it with something constructive. For years, prayers were basically, grant me my wishes, right? Or get me out of this jam I created so I can manage my drinking better next time.
Oh, yeah.
Step 3 flips that script entirely. It becomes thy will be done. It's a massive psychological spiritual shift, moving from thinking you have to be the center of everything to willingly asking for guidance. That conscious decision, that's the foundation for everything constructive that follows.
All right, so once that decision to align the will is made, the program shifts gears. It gets into the really hard internal work, starting with step 4, the searching and fearless moral inventory. Just the name sounds painful.
It is.
You're pausing everything to look back at the wreckage.
It's definitely a painful pause, and the urge to resist is huge. Like one source said, looking back to see where you were wrong feels tough, even dangerous. The temptation is always just to bury the past,
Right.
just live in the new golden present.
Ignore it.
Yeah, but skipping that review, it's disastrous. Because it means leaving all the people you harmed and all the resentments you're still carrying, leaving them standing right between you and any kind of peace.
So the goal isn't just beating yourself up or making a list of bad things you did. What's the deeper psychological aim here?
It's about building self-awareness, self-honesty, and ultimately self-respect. It's basically prepping yourself for self-acceptance.
Yeah.
You need to know who you were, what drove you, what you actually did, so you can stop defending that person and finally move on. But the biggest trap is just skimming the surface.
Skimming. Explain that. What's an honest inventory versus a surface level one?
Well, a surface inventory focuses on just the actions. I lied here. I drank too much then. I showed up late.
The what?
Right, the what. An honest inventory digs deeper. It looks at the root defects that drove those actions. Selfishness, fear, dishonesty, resentment. Natalie's story is a good example of this danger.
What happened with her?
Initially, she was kind of eager to list her wrongdoings, the surface stuff, but she wasn't getting anywhere because she completely missed why she did those things, what was motivating her. She had to look inside at the sorts of these huge, angry emotions and behaviors.
And what did she find when she finally dug deeper past that surface?
She found she'd been skimming right over incredibly painful realities, things like abandonment, incest. They were just too traumatic to face head on. So she had to translate her adult anger and control issues, her defects, into what they really were. Understandable reactions to that past trauma. The inventory forces that really profound, honest self-translation, connecting painful emotions to objective facts and character defects. It makes you see how even the quieter defects, like self-interest or manipulation, let you use alcohol as a shield to avoid feeling those big emotions.
That kind of clarity, identifying the core issues, that can't be a one-time thing. It must be ongoing.
Oh, absolutely. That honesty has to be continuous. That's why Step 10 exists the call for unremitting inventories. Daily ones, really.
So when those old defects pop up, selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear,
You deal with them immediately. The instruction is spot it, talk about it with someone, usually a sponsor, admit it, and make amends quickly if you caused harm. That immediate admission of wrong thoughts or actions is key to growing in humility and stopping a slide back into old ways.
which perfectly sets up step 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. This is the concession part. And for someone who's lived in denial, the fear must be immense.
Intense is the word. The whole life might have been built around keeping secrets. So yeah, many people are deeply suspicious of Step 5. They're convinced they'll be humiliated, rejected, judged forever, if anyone really knows what they've done.
It's hard enough looking at it yourself in Step 4.
Exactly. Sharing it feels like an impossible level of exposure.
And yet, the literature calls confession the easier, softer way. That seems like a huge contradiction. How can sharing your deepest, darkest stuff be easier?
Because trying to skip it might mean you never really overcome the drinking. The emotional and spiritual weight of holding on to those secrets is enormous. They're like poison inside. Confession to God, yourself, and crucially another person, it triggers the psychological rearrangement, a sorting out inside that finally brings real peace. It's the moment you hit the bedrock of truth and let the burden go.
Can you give an example of that kind of release, that transformation?
Well, look at Bill W. himself. Even after creating the program, he admitted something fascinating. He said it wasn't until he had this really thorough, honest talk with Father Dowling.
A Catholic priest.
Yeah, a very respected one. Bill said only then did he feel like he was finally taking his fifth. He laid everything bare, not just what he'd done, but what he'd failed to do. And he felt immediate relief.
Wow. Even for the founder.
Right. It shows that just understanding the principles intellectually isn't enough. That actual verbal sharing with another human is vital for emotional freedom.
Okay, so once that internal house cleaning happens with 4 and 5, the focus shifts outward. Restitution, steps 8 and 9. 8 is making a list of people harmed and becoming willing to make amends. 9 is actually doing it, except when doing so would injure them or others.
And this is where translating the internal principle into external action gets really critical. The key distinction here is that Step 9 is absolutely not about making the recovering person feel good or look good or get forgiveness easily. It's not for them.
No. The purpose is genuine restitution, taking accountability, and spiritual growth. It's focused entirely on the person who was harmed. We accept responsibility for everything we did wrong or failed to do right, not out of crippling shame, but out of commitment to our own growth and, hopefully, the peace of mind of others.
That except when to do so would injure them or others part seems really important for real life. How does that actually work, that caveat?
It requires real wisdom and usually guidance from others, like a sponsor. For example, say an amend involves admitting past financial dishonesty to a spouse who's currently very sick or emotionally fragile.
Okay.
Making that confession right then could be devastating. It could injure them. So it might need to be delayed or handled differently. Maybe just a promise of future financial honesty and stability.
What about other situations?
Well, if the amend involves revealing some deep secret that could now cause legal trouble or break up a completely new, stable family someone has built, often the amend is best made indirectly.
Maybe making a significant contribution to a relevant charity, or just by living an exceptionally honest and considerate life going forward. The key is the willingness to accept responsibility, regardless. That's where the freedom lies.
And you have to be willing to accept a bad outcome too, right?
Yeah.
You make the amend and they still hate you or reject you. You just have to accept that.
Absolutely. You have to be prepared for that. Some people you harmed might just need to be left alone, respectfully. You have to accept that some might continue to loathe you. Your fear of how you'll look can't drive the step, but it also can't stop you from doing what's right. The core idea is that making the amend changes us, whether or not it fixes the relationship.
Now, this whole system, from admitting defeat inside to making things right outside, it's clearly not designed for someone isolating themselves, right? It's for someone in a community. Let's circle back to that idea of the power of we.
Oh, the source materials are crystal clear on this.
Ah.
Recovery is not a solo mission. There's no expectation that you figure this all out alone, coming up with your own interpretations in a vacuum.
You need other people.
You're supported by others, sharing experience, strength, hope. For millions, the whole journey starts not with, I admitted, but with that very first word of step one, we admitted.
And that's the direct opposite of the individual trying and failing to control things through just their own isolated willpower.
Exactly. The alcoholic has proved, usually countless times, they can't manage this alone. Trying to recover solo, the likely outcome was death. But with others, there's power in numbers, strength in numbers, safety in numbers, life in numbers.
It's the shared experience.
That's the most successful way to change these lives. Identification is the key. You can't just tell someone what to do. It doesn't work. But when you hear your own story, your own feelings coming out of a stranger's mouth, your defenses just crumble.
And the early days of the movement really showed how fast this collective message could spread once it took root, and that identification factor kicked in.
Oh, definitely. Look at the Cleveland story. That was a huge test for the message's universality. The old-timers in Akron and New York were pretty skeptical when suddenly hundreds of newcomers showed up, facing just 20 or so inexperienced members in Cleveland.
Because it had taken the founders years.
Right. 4 whole years to get the first 100 success stories. But Cleveland, the growth was explosive. Something like 30 groups and several hundred members in just 1 year.
Wow.
Cleveland basically shattered the myth that the program had to grow slowly. It proved that when the need was desperate and the message was shared with real enthusiasm and personal stories, it could spread like wildfire.
And it didn't just spread person to person. The literature was key too, right?
Yeah.
Translating the message across distance and time.
Absolutely crucial for going global. The big book, Bill Wilson started drafting it back in '38. And like we said, those first 164 pages, the core philosophy, unchanged through all the editions, preserving the original ideas no matter how society shifted.
That book became the engine.
Totally. Think about Little Rock, Arkansas, that famous example. It was the first group that just popped up with zero personal contact with the founders or any existing groups.
Really?
They just read the book and wrote letters back and forth with the central office. It was the start of the mail order group idea. It proved the core message could translate effectively just through text. It could survive even without immediate physical fellowship until new groups formed.
Okay, moving from the text itself, let's talk about a core spiritual principle that really protects the message's integrity everywhere. Anonymity. Even the name, Alcoholics Anonymous, the story behind it is interesting.
Yeah, it was kind of lucky, almost ironic. The first choice was The Way Out.
Catchy.
Yeah, but turns out 12 other books already had that title, so Alcoholics Anonymous was like the 13th choice. But that name immediately suggested humility, modesty, And that gave birth to the principle of anonymity.
And what's the deeper spiritual function of anonymity? It's more than just protecting privacy, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, much more. It guards the whole movement against the big dangers. Getting caught up in property, money, celebrity, professionalism.
How so?
John D. Rockefeller, the philanthropist, gave some incredibly wise advice early on. He basically saved them from that trap by telling them not to accept huge donations or try to professionalize the work. Anonymity is seen as this sacrificial spirit,
Sacrificial.
voluntarily giving up personal desires, personal gain for the common good. That's the foundation of the traditions. It reinforces the idea that the spiritual work, the helping others, the 12th step work, it's never paid for. It should never be used for personal fame or fortune.
So it stops any one person from grabbing power or becoming the authority figure. The focus stays on the principles, not the people.
Exactly. Bill W., the co-founder, he was intensely against being put on a pedestal or having biographies written about him. He knew no human could live up to the image people were creating.
The perch, as he called it.
Right. Anonymity makes sure the focus stays on the principles, which are timeless and universally translatable, not on flawed personalities, who definitely aren't. This idea even shapes how the whole service structure works, making sure it never becomes about wealth or power, but always about the group conscience, shared decisions, not individual authority.
Okay, so if the steps successfully translate that chaotic external life into some internal order, some spiritual growth, the result, the fruit of all that work, is a completely new way of relating to yourself and the world. Let's talk about that shift in maybe life force.
Yeah, it's a massive transition. You move from constantly chasing an external high running after connection, trying to find yourself in substances, drinking to hit some peak feeling,
Right.
to something much gentler, more sustainable. An ability to just be with yourself, drawing energy from an inner source instead.
And this seems like it integrates your whole self. Things that might have been sources of shame or conflict before, like sexuality, relationships.
It absolutely does. Things like sexuality, relationships, even ambition, stop being these external pressures, things you feel you have to take from the world to feel okay or validated.
Okay.
Instead, that emotional energy starts coming from inside. It's a life force connecting you organically to yourself, to other people, and to whatever you hold sacred. Sobriety means you can actually be present in your own body, feel your feelings, figure out what you need, and express it honestly, instead of having it all muffled or distorted by a substance.
What does that feel like inside? We hear about the despair of the active addict, sometimes called a quiet drunk.
That's a perfect description. So many describe themselves that way. Quiet drunks, just fueled by constant disappointment, always chasing a feeling alcohol promised but never really delivered. The change, though, the fruit of that internal translation, it's finding this outrageous joy sometimes in spiritual living. But it's not a fleeting high like a binge. It's sustainable morning till night.
A deep call.
Yeah, this transformation leads to a really deep-seated calm and peace. A serenity inside that's, as one source beautifully put it, as unruffled by what goes on outside as the depths of the sea are unmoved by surface storms.
That is the ultimate translation, isn't it? From just existing, planning the next drink, to actually living consciously, enjoying things, making choices.
It's the difference between mere survival and truly living, yeah. Sobriety lets you actually enjoy things authentically, seeing, smelling, sensing, interacting, choosing without that constant background hum of addiction. And crucially, you start to trust your own thoughts again. Because, deep down, they're not just driven by the need for a drink. Your motives become cleaner.
And this new life, it must require a whole new kind of emotional flexibility, which seems like the opposite of the rigidity that often defines active addiction.
Totally opposite. Sobriety allows you, maybe forces you, to become more tolerant, accepting, flexible. It's such a contrast to that rigid life centered around alcohol.
You can handle change better.
You can be receptive, open to change without it throwing you into anxiety. You learn to accept life as it is, and all its messy, raw beauty, to cry, to scream, feel frustrated, actually feel things, knowing that if the root problem was a depression or anxiety, alcohol was just a really bad hiding place. It makes you deal with reality, on reality's terms.
And guiding all this new emotional landscape, is the incredible simplicity of the Serenity Prayer.
Its power is just overwhelming because it's the ultimate daily sorting tool, isn't it?
Sorting tool.
Yeah, it helps you distinguish every day between situations that need action, where you need the courage to change things you can, and situations that require acceptance, where you need the serenity to accept things you cannot change.
And the wisdom to know the difference.
That's the final piece. By accepting what is, you gain serenity. By acting where you can, you gain courage and that wisdom to tell the difference. That's the final translation of all these spiritual principles into just practical daily living.
That ability to discern when to push and when to yield, when your will needs to engage and when it needs to surrender. That feels like the culmination of everything, doesn't it?
It really is. It's finding a freedom in truth, being able to live each day, hopefully, knowing you're not suddenly perfect, not a saint,
Right.
but you can try to do your best each day without being crippled by fear of the past or anxiety about the future. Life gets contained in the simple, sober, present moment.
So what does this all mean then? The reason this recovery path works, why it translates across cultures, generations, personalities, is because it's built for maximum internal flexibility.
Exactly. Its architecture allows for incredible internal malleability. It only demands that you, the individual, find your own truth, your own definition of sanity, and your own understanding of a higher power.
It's not a fixed religious script.
Not at all. It's a framework for radical self-discovery. And it works because the ultimate authority, God, as we understood him, can be anything from the group conscience to the spiritual process itself, or a traditional divine being. The principles, not the personalities, they remain the constant translatable focus.
Okay. And to leave everyone listening with a final thought, something to chew on, building on this idea of internal translation shaping our reality.
Yeah.
We can look at that ancient text, as a man thinketh. It suggests something powerful.
It posits a man cannot directly choose his circumstances, but he can choose his thoughts, and so indirectly, yet surely, shape his circumstances.
So if our environment is just our looking glass, reflecting what's going on inside our minds,
Then the question for you today is, what thoughts are you choosing? What are you cultivating inside that's being translated into the world you see around you?